Zora Turner, age 5, stands proudly before Richard Blackwell, CEO of Horizon Enterprises, clutching her mother's resume in tiny hands. "My mommy really needs this job," she announces. Richard opens his mouth to call security when his eyes catch something on the resume that changes everything. Before we dive into this incredible story about courage, discrimination, and unexpected transformation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button right now if you've ever had to fight twice as hard to get half as far, and subscribe to see more powerful stories like this one. Now, let's find out what Richard Blackwell saw on that resume that stopped him in his tracks. Tamara Washington stared at her kitchen ceiling, the cold cloth on her forehead, doing little to ease the burning sensation of her 103-degree fever. At 32 years old, this brilliant graphic designer and single mother had weathered countless storms while raising her daughter Zora, but today's timing couldn't have been worse. The bills piled on her kitchen counter told a story of mounting debts, unpaid medical expenses from her last emergency room visit when her asthma had flared up, and the latest rent increase notice from her landlord. Tamara had been laid off from her previous position at Sterling Design, a predominantly white firm where she had spent 3 years pouring her creativity into campaigns that won industry awards. She never received credit for those designs. Time and again, she watched her ideas get stolen by white colleagues who would casually present her concepts in meetings. She wasn't invited to colleagues who subsequently received promotions and bonuses while she remained in the same junior position. The final insult came when her immediate supervisor, Brad, presented her comprehensive rebrand for their biggest client as his own work during the quarterly review. When company-wide layoffs were announced, Brad made sure Tamara's name was at the top of the list. The job hunt had been a soul-crushing exercise in racial discrimination. Phone interviews went extraordinarily well, with potential employers praising her portfolio and experience. But once she showed up for in-person interviews, she watched as enthusiasm drained from their faces. The callbacks stopped. One hiring manager had accidentally copied her on an email to his boss that read, "Candidate is black. Do we have enough diversity hires this quarter?" Tamara's apartment building in the rapidly gentrifying West Side neighborhood had once been affordable for working families. Now the new property management company had begun systematic rent increases, clearly designed to push out lower-income residents, most of whom were black. Families who had lived there for generations were disappearing month by month, replaced by young white professionals who complained about the culture of the neighborhood while simultaneously appropriating it. Just last week, the laundry room had been converted to a vintage wash experience, with prices 3 times higher than before. Yesterday, a glimmer of hope had appeared in Tamara's inbox. Horizon Enterprises, a billion-dollar marketing company known for their cutting-edge campaigns, had an opening for a senior creative director. The position offered nearly twice what she'd made at Sterling, with benefits that would cover Zora's asthma medication. After submitting her portfolio, Tamara had received a call within hours. The phone screening had gone perfectly, with the HR director practically gushing over her work. Tamara had been careful not to give away her race during the call, using the professional voice she had perfected over years of code switching. The in-person interview was scheduled for 9 o'clock this morning. It could not be rescheduled. And now here she was, burning with fever, unable to stand without the room spinning around her. "Miss Tamara, I'm so sorry, but my mother's in the hospital, and I can't watch Zora today." Her regular babysitter had just called to say, "It's an emergency." "I'm really sorry." "I understand, Kenya." "Family comes first," Tamara had whispered, her throat raw. "I hope your mom's okay." After ending the call, Tamara had broken down in silent tears. Everything was falling apart. The interview was her last chance before eviction proceedings would begin. Little did she know that in the next room, 5-year-old Zora Washington was listening. Zora, with her bright eyes and tightly coiled puffs secured with colorful barrettes, had inherited her mother's determination along with her creativity. As Tamara drifted into feverish sleep, Zora formulated her plan. First, she practiced her grown-up walk in front of the bedroom mirror, shoulders back, like Mommy always did for important meetings. Then she carefully removed her mother's portfolio and resumed from the leather folder by the door. She'd watched her mother prepare these materials last night listening as Tamara rehearsed responses to potential interview questions. Zora had memorized key phrases. 15 years of design experience, award-winning campaign for Metropolitan Museum proficient in the entire Adobe Creative Suite. She didn't know what all the words meant, but she could repeat them perfectly. Next came the hardest part, getting downtown. Zora had accompanied her mother many times on the number 7 bus. She knew they needed to transfer at Lincoln Square to the number 12. She had $5 saved from tooth fairy money. It would be enough. Carefully, so as not to wake her mother, Zora changed into her Sunday dress, the yellow one with white daisies that Grandma had sewn for her. She put on her white tights and patent leather shoes. She smoothed her hair as best she could, secured her mother's portfolio under her arm, and slipped out of the apartment. The journey downtown was both terrifying and eye-opening. An elderly white woman pulled her purse closer when Zora sat beside her on the bus. The driver, a kind-faced black man, asked where her mother was. "She's meeting me there," Zora lied, reciting the address her mother had written down. The driver looked skeptical, but let her ride. At the transfer point, a security guard watched her too closely, following a few steps behind until she boarded the next bus. A white father pulled his curious daughter away when the child tried to compliment Zora's hair. By the time she reached the towering glass building with Horizon Enterprises emblazoned across its facade, Zora understood more about her mother's world than any 5-year-old should. Richard Blackwell swirled the imported sparkling water in his crystal glass, barely listening as his executive team debated the latest diversity initiative. At 34, Richard had everything: inherited wealth, the CEO position at his family's company, and the confidence that came from never hearing the word no. Under his leadership, Horizon Enterprises had expanded, aggressively absorbing smaller creative agencies and establishing dominance in the digital marketing space. The Anderson building where they now met was named after his maternal grandfather, the original founder. "The numbers look concerning," said Catherine Phillips, the newly hired HR director. A black woman in her mid-40s, with impeccable credentials and a reputation for transforming toxic workplace cultures, Catherine had been brought on after a minor scandal involving racial insensitivity in one of their campaigns. "Our current staff is 93% white and executive leadership is 100% white. The industry average is moving toward at least 20% BIPOC representation." Richard set down his glass with more force than necessary. "We're meeting all legal requirements, Catherine. This isn't a social justice organization, it's a business." Around the table, heads nodded. Thomas Lane, the 70-year-old CFO, who'd worked alongside Richard's father for decades, chuckled. "These diversity trends come and go. Remember when everyone was panic hiring disabled folks in the 90s? That blew over." Catherine remained composed, though her eyes flashed. "With respect, research clearly demonstrates that diverse teams produce more innovative solutions and generate higher returns. This isn't about charity or trends, it's about competitive advantage." Richard checked his watch. "Fine. Put together some diversity initiatives for the PR team to promote. Make sure they're photographed for the annual report." As the meeting adjourned, Catherine lingered. "We have several promising diverse candidates interviewing today, including one for the senior creative director position at 11. Richard barely glanced at her. "Just make sure they're qualified. I'm not lowering our standards for optics." Once Catherine left, Richard turned to Thomas. "These diversity candidates," he said with air quotes, "better not waste my time. Last one we hired couldn't even keep up with our pace." Thomas laughed. "Your father used to say the same thing. Some things never change." Neither man noticed Catherine standing just outside the door, her jaw tight as she made notes on her tablet. Meanwhile, Zora Turner approached the imposing security desk in the marble lobby of Horizon Enterprises. The security guard Chester Johnson looked up from his crossword puzzle to see a tiny girl in a yellow dress clutching a portfolio almost as big as she was. Chester, who had worked security at Horizon for 25 years, had seen plenty of unusual visitors, but never a child arriving alone. "Well, hello there, little lady. Are you lost?" he asked, his voice gentle. Zora shook her head, her barrette swinging. "No, sir. I have an interview with Mr. Richard Blackwell at 9 o'clock. I'm here for my mommy because she's very sick today. She presented her mother's ID card and the interview confirmation email she'd printed out. Chester studied the girl, recognition dawning in his eyes. He had a granddaughter about her age. More importantly, he recognized something in her determined expression, something he'd seen in his own children's faces when they encountered barriers because of their skin color. A quick glance at the ID showed Tamara Washington the 9 o'clock appointment. "You know what? Let me see if Miss Phillips is available to help you out," Chester said, making a decision that could cost him his job. He picked up the phone while discreetly bypassing the normal security protocols that would have immediately removed the child from the premises. The receptionist, Jennifer, a young white woman with straight blonde hair and a permanent customer service smile, watched the exchange with obvious disdain. When Chester stepped away briefly to direct another visitor, she approached Zora. "You can't be in here without an adult," she said sharply. "This is a place of business, not a daycare." Zora stood her ground. "I have an appointment," she replied, her voice small but firm. Jennifer rolled her eyes. "Sure you do. I'm calling security to take you back to wherever you came from." "That won't be necessary," came a commanding voice. Catherine Phillips strode across the lobby, her tailored suit and confident gait causing Jennifer to straighten immediately. "Miss Phillips, I was just about to call security about this situation," Jennifer stammered. Catherine knelt to Zora's level. "Hello there. I'm Catherine. What's your name?" "Zora Turner, ma'am. I'm here for my mommy's interview. She has a really bad fever, but she needs this job very much." Zora held out the portfolio and resumed with both hands. Catherine gently accepted them, quickly scanning the materials. Tamara Washington's credentials were exceptional, her portfolio showing exactly the fresh perspective Horizon desperately needed. Catherine made a swift decision. "Jennifer, please cancel my 9:30. Zora and I are going to see Mr. Blackwell." Jennifer's jaw dropped. "But protocol clearly states—" "Thank you, Jennifer." Catherine cut her off, extending her hand to Zora. "Come with me, Miss Turner. Let's go have that interview." As they walked toward the executive elevator, Chester gave Zora a subtle thumbs up. Catherine noticed the exchange and made a mental note to thank the security guard later. In the elevator, Catherine studied the child beside her. Zora stood perfectly straight, rehearsing under her breath what sounded like memorized talking points about graphic design experience. "Your mother must be an amazing woman," Catherine observed. Zora nodded. "She works really hard. She makes the prettiest pictures for companies, but people are mean to her sometimes because of our skin." The simple truth of this statement hit Catherine hard. She had fought her entire career against that same reality. "Well," Catherine said, as the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, "let's see if we can change that today." They walked past stunned executive assistants and curious staff members toward the large corner office where Richard Blackwell was reviewing quarterly projections. Catherine knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. "Richard, I'd like to introduce you to Zora Turner. She's here representing her mother, Tamara Washington, your 9 o'clock appointment for Senior Creative Director." Richard looked up, his expression shifting from annoyance to disbelief as he saw the small child standing beside Catherine. For a moment no one spoke. Then Zora stepped forward, extended her hand just as her mother had taught her, and said with perfect diction, "It's very nice to meet you, Mr. Blackwell. My mommy couldn't come because she's sick with a fever of 103 degrees, but she really wants to work for your company because you make the best ads in the whole wide world." Richard Blackwell stared at the tiny hand extended toward him, then at Catherine's expectant face, certain this was some elaborate prank. "What is this?" he finally asked, ignoring Zora's outstretched hand. "This is completely inappropriate. Get this child out of my office and reschedule the interview." Catherine remained where she stood. "I believe we should hear what Zora has to say. Her mother is Tamara Washington, an exceptionally qualified candidate who is seriously ill today." Instead of simply missing the interview, her daughter took extraordinary measures to ensure her mother's opportunity wasn't lost. Richard laughed incredulously. "You can't be serious. This is a billion-dollar company, not a kindergarten career day." Zora's hand slowly lowered, but her chin lifted. She carefully opened the portfolio on Richard's desk, displaying her mother's award-winning designs. "My mommy made all these. This one got an important award, but they gave the trophy to a man named Brad instead." Richard's amusement began to fade as he glanced at the portfolio. The work was undeniably impressive, displaying a fresh aesthetic that Horizon's recent campaigns had been lacking. Still, this situation was absurd. "Listen, kid, Zora, was it? This is very cute, but I'm running a business here. Catherine, please take her downstairs and call someone to pick her up." Zora wasn't finished. "My mommy says she's been designing for 15 years. She knows Adobe Creative Suite, Photoshop, and InDesign. She made the pictures for the big museum in New York, but they didn't put her name on it because she's black." The blunt statement hung in the air. Richard shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sure your mother is very talented, but this isn't how we conduct interviews at Horizon." "Why not?" Zora asked with genuine curiosity. "Is it because we're black?" "That's what happened at the other places. Mommy said she did good on the phone when they couldn't see her, but when she went to the offices, they looked at her funny and never called back." Catherine watched Richard's face, carefully noting the flicker of recognition. This was exactly the pattern she'd been trying to address in their hiring practices. "Zora, can you tell us more about your mother's experience?" Catherine encouraged gently. Zora nodded eagerly. "One time, Mommy came home crying because the man said they already hired someone, but then her friend saw they were still looking for people. Another time, they said she wasn't a culture fit. But Mommy said that's what they say when they don't want black people." Richard's discomfort grew. These were phrases he'd heard used in his own company. And at her last job, they made her sit in the back room away from customers. Her boss took all her ideas and said they were his. When people got prizes for their work, Mommy never got one, even though she stayed late every night working. Catherine interjected. "The portfolio shows she worked at Sterling Design. They won 3 industry awards last year for campaigns that match her style exactly, yet her name doesn't appear in any credits." Richard was about to respond when his office door opened. Marcus Johnson, the only black member of Horizon's executive board and head of client relations, stepped in. "Sorry to interrupt, Richard, but Jennifer said there was some kind of situation." He stopped short, seeing Zora. "Well, hello there." "Hello, sir," Zora responded politely. Marcus noticed the portfolio on the desk, stepping closer to examine it. "Wait, this is Tamara Washington's work. I tried to hire her 3 years ago when I was at Beacon Media. She's brilliant." He looked at Richard. "How did you manage to get her in for an interview? Last I heard, she was being courted by several major agencies." Catherine explained the situation while Richard watched Marcus flip through the portfolio with growing excitement. "This campaign concept is exactly what we need for the Westfield account. And this approach to the healthcare rebrand, it's innovative without being alienating to traditional audiences. Richard, if she can present like she designs, we need to hire her immediately." Richard cleared his throat. "Marcus the child says Tamara Washington has been rejected from several positions despite her qualifications. Do you know anything about that?" Marcus's expression darkened. "Unfortunately, yes. The industry has a problem with recognizing black talent, especially black women." He hesitated, then added, "including at times this company." "What do you mean?" Richard demanded. Marcus exchanged glances with Catherine before answering. "Tamara Washington has applied to Horizon 3 times over the past 5 years. She was rejected each time without an interview, despite recommendations from several creative directors. The last rejection happened under your father's leadership about 18 months ago." Richard's face registered genuine surprise. "That's impossible. I review all final candidates for senior positions." "Not all of them make it to your desk," Catherine said quietly. As if on cue, Zora asked the question that had been forming in her mind. "Why do people think black people can't make good pictures? My mommy's pictures are the most beautiful in the world." The innocent question cut through the corporate politics and professional facades in the room. Richard found himself speechless, unable to offer the child a satisfactory answer about a system he had benefited from and perpetuated. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in the workplace? Comment number 1. If you've seen qualified people overlooked because of their race or background. Hit that like button if you believe talent should be recognized regardless of skin color. What do you think Richard will do now that he's confronted with his company's discriminatory practices? Subscribe to find out as we continue this powerful story of courage and transformation. Would Richard dig deeper into his company's problematic past, or would he dismiss Zora and continue business as usual? Let's see what happens next. The silence in Richard Blackwell's office stretched uncomfortably until Catherine finally suggested, "Perhaps we should look into the previous applications Miss Washington submitted." Richard, still processing Marcus's revelation, nodded curtly. "Pull the files." While Catherine stepped out to retrieve the records, Marcus entertained Zora with a pad of paper and colored pens from Richard's desk. Richard watched the child drawing intently her small face, a picture of concentration, as she created what appeared to be a family portrait. He found himself wondering about her life, about the mother who had obviously raised such an articulate, brave child under difficult circumstances. Catherine returned with a thick folder and placed it on Richard's desk. "These are all the diversity candidates rejected in the final rounds over the past 3 years, sorted by department. Tamara Washington's applications are flagged on top." Richard opened the folder, finding 3 separate applications from Tamara Washington. Each application showed impeccable qualifications that exceeded the job requirements. Each rejection notice contained the same phrase, "Not a cultural fit for Horizon Enterprises." More disturbing were the handwritten notes in his father's distinctive script. On Tamara's first application, "Too urban aesthetic." On her second, aggressive tone in cover letter. On her third, scholarship education, likely affirmative action candidate. Richard felt a coldness spreading through his chest. He had idolized his father, believing Robert Blackwell's business acumen and judgment to be beyond reproach. He had modeled his own leadership style after his father's, including his approach to hiring. Now, seeing the evidence of systematic discrimination documented in his father's own handwriting, Richard felt the foundation of his beliefs beginning to crack. "There's more," Catherine said quietly, placing a spreadsheet before him. "This tracks the progression of all candidates who reached the final interview stage in the past 5 years, color-coded by racial demographic. White candidates with B-level portfolios were hired over BIPOC candidates with A-level portfolios 78% of the time." As Richard stared at the data, an unbidden memory surfaced from his childhood. He had been 12 playing basketball in the family's indoor court with James, the son of their housekeeper. The boys had been inseparable that summer until Richard's father discovered the friendship. The help's children are not appropriate playmates. Robert Blackwell had declared firing James's mother the following week for boundary issues. Richard had never questioned this decision, accepting his father's judgment, as he did in all things. Now, 22 years later, he wondered what had happened to James and his mother after they disappeared from his life. "I need to make some calls," Richard said abruptly. "Catherine, Marcus, give me the room. And take Zora to the break room for a snack or something." Once alone, Richard picked up his phone and called Tamara Washington's previous employer. "This is Richard Blackwell, CEO of Horizon Enterprises. I'm conducting a reference check for Tamara Washington." The creative director at Sterling Design was surprisingly candid. Washington talented as hell, but difficult. Always complaining about recognition, wanting her name on projects. We couldn't accommodate her demands. Richard pressed further. "I'm looking at award-winning campaigns that match her portfolio exactly. Was she involved in those projects?" After a telling pause, she contributed some early concepts that we refined. A call to the design professor listed as a reference revealed more. "Tamara was my top student 5 years running. The industry's treatment of her has been shameful. Do you know her Bradley Williams campaign concept was stolen by her supervisor at Sterling? The man won a national award for her work." By the time Richard had made his 5th call, a pattern had emerged that was impossible to ignore. Tamara Washington had been systematically denied credit advancement and recognition throughout her career, despite producing work that defined campaigns and won awards for others. Meanwhile, in the executive break room, Zora had fallen asleep on a comfortable couch, exhausted from her morning adventure. Catherine and Marcus spoke in hushed tones. "Do you think anything will change?" Catherine asked. Richard is his father's son. The company culture starts at the top. Marcus sighed. I've been trying to change things incrementally from the inside, but it's like swimming against the current. Even with my position on the board, I'm often the only voice advocating for diversity beyond token gestures. Why do you stay? Catherine asked. Honestly, to hold the door open for others. Each qualified black professional I can get hired here changes the environment a little. But days like today, he glanced at sleeping. Zora make me question if it's enough. Their conversation was interrupted by Richard's assistant announcing that security had located Tamara Washington. The frantic mother had been searching downtown for her missing daughter despite her high fever. She was currently in the lobby demanding to see Zora. Bring her up immediately, Catherine instructed. And find some cold water and aspirin. When Tamara Washington stepped off the executive elevator, her appearance betrayed her illness and distress. Despite her fever, she had thrown on professional attire, though her blouse was misbuttoned and her normally immaculate braids were hastily secured. Her eyes were wild with fear, until they landed on Zora sleeping peacefully on the break room couch. Zora, she cried, rushing to her daughter. The sound woke the child, who smiled sleepily. Hi, Mommy. Did you feel better? I did your interview for you. Tamara gathered her daughter in a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. Do you have any idea how scared I was? How could you leave the apartment alone? You could have been hurt or lost, or... Her tirade was cut short by a coughing fit. Catherine quickly provided the water and medicine she had requested. As Tamara collected herself, she became aware of her surroundings and the executives watching her. Embarrassment colored her cheeks as professional instincts kicked in. I'm so sorry for this disruption. My daughter has never done anything like this before. Richard Blackwell stepped forward, extending his hand. Miss Washington, I'm Richard Blackwell. Your daughter has been telling us about your qualifications. Tamara looked mortified, but Richard continued. Perhaps we could continue this conversation in my office. Your portfolio is quite impressive. Tamara glanced at Zora, who beamed proudly. I showed them all your pretty pictures, Mommy. And the awards you should have gotten. Catherine placed a reassuring hand on Tamara's shoulder. Your daughter is remarkable, and so is your work. We'd like to discuss the senior creative director position with you if you're feeling up to it. Despite her fever and exhaustion, Tamara straightened her spine. This was the opportunity she had been fighting for. Yes, of course. I'd be happy to discuss the position. As they walked toward Richard's office, Marcus whispered to Catherine. This should be interesting. Catherine nodded. The question is whether Richard is ready to confront not just his father's prejudice, but his own. Back in the executive conference room, Richard Blackwell faced the biggest challenge of his career, recognizing the truth about the company he had inherited and the values that had shaped it. And all because a 5-year-old girl had been brave enough to stand in for her mother. Tamara Washington sat rigidly in the plush leather chair across from Richard Blackwell, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to prevent their trembling. Despite the aspirin Catherine had given her, her fever still burned, and anxiety about Zora's actions only heightened her physical discomfort. Zora sat beside her, swinging her legs, and looking entirely too pleased with herself. Catherine and Marcus flanked Richard on the other side of the massive mahogany desk, their expressions carefully neutral. First, Richard began, his voice cool and professional. Let me address the situation with your daughter. While her initiative is unusual, bringing a child to a corporate headquarters unannounced creates significant liability issues for Horizon. I have to question the judgment involved. Tamara's spine stiffened further. Mr. Blackwell, I can assure you I had no knowledge of my daughter's actions. I was delirious with fever when she left our apartment. The moment I realized she was missing, I searched everywhere despite my illness. I would never endanger my child for a job interview. Yet here we are, Richard continued, with your 5-year-old daughter having navigated public transportation alone to deliver your resume. His implication hung in the air. What kind of mother would allow such a thing? Tamara felt a familiar anger rising beneath her fever. Throughout her career she had swallowed such judgments, smiled through veiled insults, and accepted less than she deserved. Not today. Not with her child watching. Mr. Blackwell, she said, her voice steady. Despite her physical state, my daughter made a poor decision out of love and concern for our family's welfare. Before judging my parenting, perhaps consider why a 5-year-old felt such desperation about a job interview. Consider why economic stability seems so precarious for a highly qualified professional with 15 years of award-winning experience. Richard's expression tightened. We're not here to discuss socioeconomic factors, Miss Washington. We're discussing a specific role at Horizon Enterprises. Are we, Tamara, challenged? Because it seems we're discussing your perception of me as a mother, rather than as a candidate for senior creative director. Would you question a white male candidate's parenting if his child showed initiative? Or would you call it precocious leadership? Catherine suppressed a smile, as Marcus coughed to hide a laugh. Richard shifted uncomfortably before changing tactics. Your portfolio shows promise, but the senior creative director role requires leadership experience. I see you've never held a management position. Because I've never been given the opportunity, Tamara replied evenly, despite repeatedly training junior designers who were later promoted over me. My ideas have driven campaigns that won 3 national awards, yet my name appears nowhere in the credits. I've led projects without the title or compensation a white colleague would have received. Richard examined her resume again. The position advertised offers a salary range of $90,000 to $120,000 depending on experience. Given your unconventional career progression, we could start you at $85,000 with a review after 6 months. Tamara didn't flinch. The position requires 10 years of experience. I have 15. The role demands proficiency across print and digital platforms. I've mastered both. The job expects leadership qualities. I've mentored junior designers throughout my career without recognition. The listed salary range begins at $90,000, not $85,000. She leaned forward. Mr. Blackwell, I've spent my entire career accepting less than I'm worth. I won't do that anymore, especially not with my daughter watching. If you're offering me this position, it needs to be at the appropriate compensation level of $120,000, reflecting my experience and the value I'll bring to Horizon. Richard's eyes narrowed. That's the upper band reserved for candidates with executive experience, which I would have if the industry recognized black talent appropriately. Tamara countered. Your own board member, Mr. Johnson, just confirmed my qualifications exceed your requirements. The only factor preventing me from commanding top compensation is systemic racial bias, which I refuse to accept any longer. Richard straightened his tie, visibly annoyed. Miss Washington, while I appreciate your directness, there's a difference between confidence and entitlement. Horizon has standards that apparently include rejecting my application 3 times without even an interview, Tamara interjected. Yes, I remember each application I've submitted to Horizon over the years, and the form rejections claiming I wasn't a cultural fit. I'm aware of what that euphemism means in this industry. Richard paled slightly. You've applied here before. 3 times, Tamara confirmed. Each time with qualifications that matched or exceeded your requirements. Each time rejected without so much as a phone call. Catherine intervened. Richard, the documentation confirms Miss Washington's account. Her previous applications were rejected during initial screening despite exceptional portfolios. Richard cleared his throat. Given this history, I can offer you the position at $90,000, which is still a significant opportunity. Tamara stood, gathering her portfolio and taking Zora's hand. Mr. Blackwell, I came here today despite a 103-degree fever because I believed Horizon might be different. I see now it isn't. Thank you for your time, but I'll need to decline your offer. Catherine stood as well. Tamara, please wait. Richard, a word. As Catherine pulled Richard aside for a heated, whispered conversation, Marcus approached Tamara. Your work is exceptional. Don't give up on Horizon just yet. Tamara shook her head. I've spent too many years compromising my worth. I won't teach my daughter that's acceptable. Unbeknownst to everyone in the room, Catherine had activated the recording function on her tablet when the meeting began. She had documented similar instances of pay discrimination over her first month at Horizon, building evidence for potential legal action if the company refused to change its practices. What Catherine didn't know was that Maria Gutierrez, a reporter from the Business Journal, was currently waiting in the lobby for her scheduled interview about Horizon's new diversity initiative. The reporter had overheard Jennifer, the receptionist, gossiping about the crazy situation with some black child crashing a job interview upstairs. Intrigued, Maria had begun asking questions. As Tamara and Zora waited for the elevator, Richard approached them, Catherine and Marcus close behind. Miss Washington, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. The standard offer for a candidate of your caliber would indeed start at the upper band. If you're still interested, we'd like to formally offer you the Senior Creative Director position at $120,000 annually, with full benefits effective immediately. Tamara studied his face, noting the tightness around his eyes and mouth. This wasn't a change of heart. This was damage control. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell, but I've made my decision. A company that values diversity only when forced to do so isn't where I want to build my career. The elevator doors opened and Tamara guided Zora inside. As the doors closed on Richard's stunned expression, Zora looked up at her mother. Did I do something wrong? Mommy Tamara knelt despite her dizziness, looking her daughter in the eyes. No, baby. You did something brave. Too brave. And we'll talk about the dangers later, but never think standing up for what's right is wrong. As they crossed the lobby, Tamara noticed a woman with a press badge watching them intently. Excuse me, the woman called, approaching quickly. I'm Maria Gutierrez from the Business Journal. Would you mind telling me what just happened upstairs? Tamara hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. My name is Tamara Washington. I'm a graphic designer with 15 years of experience who was just offered a job at below market rate because of what I strongly believe is racial discrimination, continuing a pattern I've experienced throughout my career. Maria's eyes widened as she scribbled notes. Would you be willing to speak on the record about this? For a moment, Tamara considered the risks. Speaking out could blacklist her from future opportunities. Staying silent would perpetuate the system. She looked down at Zora, who had shown more courage today than most adults ever would. Yes, Tamara decided. I would. It's time someone did. From the executive floor window, Richard watched Tamara speaking with the reporter, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Beside him, Catherine spoke quietly. This could have been avoided. She's just one disgruntled candidate, Richard dismissed. This won't amount to anything. Catherine shook her head. You still don't understand what's happening here, do you? This isn't about one job or one candidate. This is about a system you've benefited from and perpetuated. And now that system is being exposed. As if confirming her words, Richard's phone began to ring. It was the head of public relations, his voice tight with concern. Richard, we have a situation developing in the lobby. A Business Journal reporter is interviewing a rejected job candidate about discriminatory practices, and someone's live streaming it on social media. It's already got 5,000 views and climbing. By the following morning, the video of Zora Turner walking confidently through Horizon Enterprises' lobby had accumulated over 2 million views across platforms. A lobby security camera had captured her exchange with Jennifer, the receptionist, including the woman's dismissive treatment and Zora's dignified response. Someone had added captions and emotional background music, transforming the 5-year-old into an instant symbol of innocence confronting corporate racism. Brave black child challenges billion-dollar companies. Racism screamed the headlines on trending news sites. Social media users were calling for boycotts of Horizon's clients. Hashtags like #Horizon discriminates and #Believe Black Talent were trending nationwide. Richard Blackwell's personal social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. This is an unmitigated disaster, hissed Leonard Price, Horizon's head of public relations, as the crisis management team assembled in the main conference room. Maria Gutierrez's article just dropped in the Business Journal, and it's brutal. She interviewed 3 former employees who corroborated Washington's claims of systematic discrimination. They're calling us corporate America's poster child for racial bias. Catherine Phillips sat quietly watching Richard pace at the head of the table. She had spent the night reviewing Horizon's hiring data, confirming what she had suspected. The company had consistently passed over qualified BIPOC candidates in favor of less qualified white candidates. The evidence was damning. Our first priority is containing the spread, Leonard continued. I've drafted a statement emphasizing our commitment to diversity and inclusion, highlighting our recent initiatives. What initiatives? Marcus Johnson interrupted. The ones that exist only in press releases. The diversity task force that never meets the mentorship program without any actual mentors. We can't lie our way out of this, Leonard looked affronted. It's not lying. It's strategic communication. We emphasize our aspirational goals rather than current reality. Before Marcus could respond, the conference room door burst open. Robert Blackwell, Richard's father and former CEO, stormed in. At 71, he remained an imposing figure, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his custom suit immaculate. "What the hell is happening to my company?" he demanded, glaring at his son. "I'm getting calls from board members about some discrimination scandal. Fix this immediately." Richard straightened, instinctively responding to his father's commanding presence. "We're implementing crisis response protocols. The PR team is preparing a statement." Robert cut him off. "I don't want statements. I want this buried. Buy the woman off if necessary." "How much does she want?" "Everyone has a price." Catherine exchanged glances with Marcus. This was exactly the attitude that had created the problem in the first place. Richard looked uncomfortable. "Father, there's more to this situation than you realize. We have documented evidence of problematic hiring practices, including notes in your handwriting rejecting qualified black candidates." Robert's face darkened. "You're blaming me for this circus. I built this company from nothing. We hire the best talent, period. If certain people don't make the cut, that's not our problem." "Actually, Sir," Catherine interjected, "it is your problem when qualified candidates are rejected based on racial bias rather than merit. That's illegal discrimination, and the evidence suggests a clear pattern." Robert turned his cold gaze on Catherine. "And who exactly are you?" Catherine Phillips, HR Director. "I was hired 3 months ago to address workplace culture issues." "Well, Miss Phillips, you're fired. Clear out your office by noon." Richard stepped between them. "Father, you don't have that authority anymore." Catherine stays. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room, broken by Leonard's phone buzzing. His face paled as he read the message. "Westfield just pulled their account. They're citing the controversy and saying they can't be associated with a company facing discrimination allegations. That's $12 million in annual billing gone." Another phone chimed. Then another. Within minutes, it became clear that 3 major clients were suspending their contracts pending investigation into Horizon's practices. Richard dismissed the crisis team to make emergency calls to clients, leaving just himself, his father, Catherine, and Marcus in the conference room. "This is your fault," Robert said to Richard. "You've gone soft, letting diversity hires and social justice warriors infiltrate the company." "They're not diversity hires," Richard retorted, his patience thinning. "Catherine and Marcus are exceptionally qualified professionals who happen to be black, and they're trying to save this company from people like you who can't see past your own prejudice." Robert looked as if he'd been slapped. "How dare you speak to me that way? I gave you everything. You gave me a company built on discrimination," Richard interrupted. "You taught me to perpetuate a system that judges people by their skin color rather than their talent, and now that system is collapsing around us." While the Blackwells argued, Catherine quietly pulled up Tamara Washington's portfolio on the large conference room screen. Her designs filled the wall, vibrant, innovative campaigns that seamlessly blended cultural insights with commercial appeal. Many were concepts Horizon had rejected years ago, now strikingly similar to successful campaigns created by their competitors. "This is what we rejected," Catherine said, her voice cutting through the argument. "This talent, this vision. This is what our competitors have been capitalizing on while we clung to outdated hiring practices." Richard stared at the portfolio with new eyes. He had been reviewing applicants for years, but how many Tamara Washingtons had he missed? How much talent had Horizon lost because of biases he had inherited and never questioned? His contemplation was interrupted by his assistant announcing an emergency board meeting called for 5 o'clock. Meanwhile, across town, Tamara Washington sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone in disbelief. Since the previous evening, she had received job offers from 5 of Horizon's competitors, including 2 at director level with salaries exceeding $150,000. Design blogs were calling her a hidden industry genius. Her portfolio website had crashed from excessive traffic. Beside her, Zora calmly ate cereal, seemingly unaware of the storm she had helped create. "Mommy, are you still mad at me?" she asked between spoonfuls. Tamara sighed, her anger having faded into a complex mixture of pride and concern. "I'm not mad, baby, but we still need to talk about why what you did was dangerous. You can't leave the house alone like that. You could have been hurt." Zora nodded solemnly. "I know. But you were so sad about the job and I wanted to help." Tamara pulled her daughter into a tight hug, marveling at the child's courage and compassion. Her phone rang again, an unknown number. Expecting another reporter, she almost ignored it. Instead, she answered to hear Marcus Johnson's voice. "Miss Washington, I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to update you on some developments at Horizon." He explained the client exodus, the emergency board meeting, and the internal conflict her application had exposed. "Richard Blackwell has been reviewing your work all morning. I think he's finally seeing what he missed. Would you be willing to come back for another conversation? Not an interview this time, a consultation on how Horizon can do better." Tamara hesitated. "Why would I help a company that rejected me 3 times based on my race? Because you have the opportunity to change things for the next generation of black designers," Marcus replied, "including your daughter." As Tamara considered his words, her social media notifications exploded with a new development. An anonymous employee had leaked internal documents showing years of discriminatory hiring practices at Horizon Enterprises, including emails between executives discussing ways to maintain the company's cultural identity by limiting diversity. The hashtag number Horizon Exposed was now trending nationally. Do you believe one person can change a deeply entrenched system? Comment number 1, if you think Tamara should give Horizon another chance, or number 2, if she should walk away for good. Hit the like button. If you've ever had to be twice as good to get half the recognition, what would you do in Tamara's position after experiencing such blatant discrimination? Subscribe to see whether Richard will truly confront his problicus to the PETA, company's racist past, or if this is just damage control. The question remains, can a corporation built on discrimination truly change, or is this simply a PR crisis they're trying to manage? Let's find out in the next part of this powerful story. The address Tamara's navigation app had directed her to was in the West Side neighborhood, just 3 blocks from her own apartment building. She double-checked the text from Richard Blackwell, confirming she had the right location. It seemed unlikely that the CEO of Horizon Enterprises would request a meeting in this part of town, especially given the upscale corporate headquarters downtown. Yet here she was, standing before a worn brick apartment complex with peeling paint and security bars on the lower windows. Zora, who had refused to be left with a neighbor despite Tamara's insistence, clutched her hand tightly. "Is this where the rich man lives, Mommy?" she asked, her eyes wide as she took in the building's dilapidated state. "No, sweetheart. I think there must be some mistake." As Tamara pulled out her phone to call Marcus Johnson, who had arranged the meeting, a sleek black luxury car pulled up to the curb. Richard Blackwell stepped out, looking entirely out of place in his tailored suit. He nodded curtly to Tamara. "Miss Washington, thank you for agreeing to meet." He glanced around, taking in the graffiti-covered walls and cracked sidewalks with poorly concealed discomfort. "I thought we were meeting at your office," Tamara said, maintaining a professional distance. Richard shook his head. "I wanted to see something first." He gestured toward the apartment building. "This property is owned by Blackwell Urban Development, a subsidiary of my investment group. We purchased it along with 12 other buildings in this neighborhood last year as part of a neighborhood improvement initiative." The way he said the phrase suggested he now recognized it as a euphemism. As they stood talking, a group of residents exited the building. Upon spotting Richard, their expressions hardened. An elderly black woman approached them, her eyes flashing with recognition. "You're one of them, aren't you? The new owners who keep raising our rent." My family's lived in this building for 40 years, and now you're trying to push us out." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I'm here to—" "We know what you're here to do," she cut him off. "First comes the rent increases. Then the essential renovations that make the place unlivable for months. Then the eviction notices when people can't pay. We've seen it all before." Other residents gathered, their hostility palpable. Tamara stepped forward. "Mrs. Robinson, it's me, Tamara Washington, from apartment 412 in the building down the street." The elderly woman's expression softened slightly. "Tamara, what are you doing with this man?" "It's complicated," Tamara replied, "but I think he's here to listen." Mrs. Robinson looked skeptical but nodded. "Well, we've got plenty to say." Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private." Tamara considered him for a moment, then made a decision. "You wanted to see reality, Mr. Blackwell. This is it. These are the people affected by your company's investments. If you're serious about understanding, then listen to them." For the next 30 minutes, Richard Blackwell received an education unlike any he'd experienced in his privileged life. Residents described systematic attempts to force them out through neglected maintenance, arbitrary rule changes, and relentless rent increases. One family had seen their rent jump by 40% in a single year. An elderly veteran was facing eviction after falling behind when the building's new management company eliminated the grace period for late payments that the previous owner had allowed. Throughout it all, Richard remained silent, his expression increasingly troubled. When the impromptu community meeting finally dispersed, he turned to Tamara. "I had no idea. The investment group presents these as underperforming assets with significant upside potential. The human cost never appears in the spreadsheets." Tamara's response was measured. "That's the problem with viewing everything as assets and liabilities. People become abstractions. Black and brown communities become underperforming neighborhoods rather than homes and histories." Richard nodded slowly. "You said you live nearby, 3 blocks down. My building was purchased by an investment group 6 months ago. We're experiencing the same issues." She studied his face. "Did you know your company owns my building too?" Richard's surprise seemed genuine. "No, I didn't. The holdings are managed through layers of subsidiaries. I sign off on overall strategy, but rarely see the individual properties." "Convenient," Tamara observed. Richard didn't disagree. Zora, who had been quietly observing the adults, suddenly tugged on Richard's sleeve. "Do you want to see our apartment? Mommy makes the best lemonade." Before Tamara could intervene, Richard nodded. "I'd like that if your mother doesn't mind." Tamara hesitated, then agreed. "It might be educational for you to see how the other half lives." The walk to Tamara's building was eye-opening for Richard. He noticed the disappearing local businesses, replaced by upscale coffee shops and boutiques most residents couldn't afford. He saw the police cruiser that slowed as they passed a group of black teenagers, the officer watching them with unwarranted suspicion. He witnessed an elderly black man being followed by a store security guard while white customers shopped unbothered. By the time they reached Tamara's apartment, Richard's worldview had already begun to shift. Tamara's home was modest but immaculately kept. One wall was covered with Zora's artwork and school achievements. The furniture was clearly second-hand, but chosen with an artist's eye for color and form. Most striking was Tamara's workspace, a corner of the living room transformed into a professional design studio with a high-end computer and carefully organized materials. "This is where I create most of my portfolio," Tamara explained, setting down her purse. "After paying rent and childcare, I couldn't afford both office space and equipment, so I chose the tools." As promised, she made lemonade, while Zora proudly showed Richard her drawings. When they were finally seated at the small kitchen table, Richard got to the point. "Miss Washington, Horizon Enterprises is in crisis largely of our own making. The documents leaked yesterday have exposed years of discriminatory practices that I can no longer deny or ignore." Tamara nodded but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I came here today because I wanted to understand your reality before proposing anything. I realize now how little I comprehended about the systemic barriers you faced." He paused, collecting his thoughts. I'd like to offer you the Senior Creative Director position again, but under new terms. Full creative control of your department. Salary of $175,000 annually, 20% above industry standard. A budget to build your team as you see fit. Tamara's expression remained neutral. Why the sudden generosity? It's not generosity, Richard replied. It's appropriate compensation for your talent and experience, plus recognition of the industry's historical undervaluation of Black creatives. But more importantly, I want you to help transform Horizon's culture from the inside. And if I refuse, Richard sighed, then I'll understand completely. But the offer stands regardless. Tamara studied him carefully. What changed, Mr. Blackwell? 2 days ago, you were questioning my parenting and offering below-market compensation. Why should I believe this conversion is genuine? Richard considered her question seriously. Yesterday, I spent 6 hours reviewing every hiring decision made during my tenure as CEO. I found a consistent pattern of preferring candidates who looked and thought like me even when their qualifications were inferior. I rejected exceptional talent because it didn't fit my narrow definition of cultural fit. He gestured to Tamara's portfolio displayed on her computer screen. Your work represents exactly what Horizon needs to remain relevant. But beyond the business case, there's a moral imperative I can no longer ignore. Tamara remained skeptical. Pretty words. What about actions? The board has authorized a complete overhaul of our hiring and promotion practices, effective immediately. Catherine Phillips has been promoted to Chief Diversity Officer with expanded authority and budget. Marcus Johnson is now Executive Vice President. Richard hesitated, then added, and I've initiated a review of all Blackwell urban development properties with a moratorium on rent increases and evictions pending new policies. Tamara absorbed this information silently. Finally, Zora spoke up from where she had been coloring nearby. Mommy always says actions speak louder than words. Are you going to do good actions now, Mr. Richman? Richard found himself smiling at the child's directness. I'm certainly going to try Zora, starting today. Tamara set down her lemonade glass. I'll need time to consider your offer. I have other options now, including starting my own agency. Richard nodded. I understand, but I hope you'll consider the impact you could have at Horizon. Not just for yourself, but for others facing the same barriers. As Richard prepared to leave, Tamara walked him to the door. One more thing, Mr. Blackwell. If I were to accept your offer, I'd expect transparency about Horizon's involvement in gentrifying neighborhoods like this one. Your company's role in displacing Black and Brown communities contradicts any diversity initiatives you implement internally. Richard paused in the doorway, struck by the connection he had never previously considered between his corporate policies and community impact. You're right. Complete transparency and a reevaluation of our real estate investments. You have my word. As he walked back toward his waiting car, Richard Blackwell felt simultaneously humbled and determined. For the first time, he was seeing the world without the protective filter of privilege, and the view was profoundly uncomfortable. Yet somehow, in that discomfort, he found a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life of inherited wealth and position. The question remained whether Tamara Washington would choose to be part of Horizon's transformation or forge her own path forward. Either way, nothing would be the same again. The Horizon Enterprises executive boardroom had never felt so tense. 24 hours after his visit to Tamara's neighborhood, Richard Blackwell faced the company's board of directors and his father, whose expression remained thunderous throughout Richard's presentation. The audit results are unambiguous, Richard concluded, gesturing to the comprehensive report Catherine Phillips had helped prepare. Over the past decade, Horizon has systematically rejected qualified Black and Brown candidates at every level. We've maintained a corporate culture that penalizes diversity of thought and experience. We've lost immeasurable talent and innovative potential as a result. Murmurs spread around the table as board members exchanged uneasy glances. These were powerful men and women, predominantly white, who had benefited from the very system Richard was condemning. This isn't just a PR problem we can solve with carefully worded statements, Richard continued. It's a fundamental failure of leadership, starting with me. Robert Blackwell slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You're crucifying the company over one disgruntled applicant and her publicity stunt. The board should remove you immediately, if this is your idea of crisis management. This isn't about one applicant, Father Richard replied evenly. Tamara Washington's experience simply exposed a pattern we've ignored for years. He turned to address the full board. We have two choices: genuinely transform our practices and culture, or continue pretending diversity statements and token hires absolve us of responsibility. I recommend the former. Catherine Phillips stepped forward to present the comprehensive diversity plan she had developed months ago, which had previously been ignored. It included revised hiring protocols, transparency and promotion decisions, executive accountability metrics, and community investment initiatives. Implementation begins immediately, Richard stated. Any board member who can't fully support these changes should resign now. Robert Blackwell's face flushed with anger. You would destroy everything we've built over some temporary social media outrage. This company exists to generate profit for shareholders, not to advance social causes. Those aren't mutually exclusive goals, Marcus Johnson interjected. Research consistently shows diverse companies outperform homogeneous ones. We're losing market share precisely because we've failed to evolve. Another board member, Victoria Hartwell, spoke up. The financial implications of this controversy are already severe. We've lost $17 million in client contracts since yesterday. Our stock has dropped 12%. Major investors are demanding answers. Exactly why we need to take decisive action, Richard responded. Starting with bringing Tamara Washington on board to lead a new creative division. That woman, Robert scoffed. The one who unleashed this media circus? Absolutely not. Richard's expression hardened. This isn't a request or suggestion. I've already extended the offer as CEO. The board can choose to support this direction or replace me. The ultimatum hung in the air. Board members exchanged concerned glances, calculating political and financial consequences. Robert Blackwell stood his voice cold. If this company is going to commit suicide, I won't stay to watch. I resign from this board effective immediately. He fixed Richard with a withering stare. You're no son of mine. As Robert stormed out, the remaining board members faced a pivotal decision. After 30 tense minutes of debate, they voted 8-3 to support Richard's proposed changes with the stipulation that Catherine would provide monthly progress reports directly to the board. Meanwhile, across town, Tamara Washington sat in her favorite coffee shop, surrounded by competing job offers. The opportunities that had suddenly appeared were both validating and infuriating. Where had these companies been during her years of struggle? Were they genuinely interested in her talent, or merely trying to avoid becoming the next Horizon? Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Board approved all changes. Offer stands. Your choice now. Tamara sighed, her thoughts conflicted. Taking Richard's offer meant returning to a company with a documented history of discrimination. Starting her own agency would give her complete creative freedom, but less immediate impact on industry practices. Accepting one of the competitor offers might provide financial security, but without any guarantee of cultural change. As she weighed her options, Tamara noticed a familiar face at a nearby table. James Porter, a former classmate from design school, was meeting with a young black woman who appeared to be showing him her portfolio. Tamara had always admired James for starting his own agency, specifically focused on creating opportunities for designers of color. She approached their table after the young woman left. James Tamara Washington. It's been years. His face lit with recognition. Tamara, I was hoping to run into you. Your name is everywhere right now. They spent the next hour catching up with James, sharing his experiences building Porter Creative, an agency that had grown from his apartment operation to a respected boutique firm with 15 employees. The hardest part wasn't finding talent, James explained. It was convincing clients to trust agencies owned and staffed by people of color. We had to be twice as good for half the recognition. His words echoed Tamara's own experience. What would you do? She finally asked, explaining her current options. If you had the chance to change Horizon from within, would you take it? James considered carefully. 5 years ago, I would have said no. but now he shrugged. Sometimes you have to enter the fortress to lower the drawbridge for others. Just make sure they put everything in writing and give you real authority, not just a fancy title. That evening, Tamara discussed her options with her mother over dinner, while Zora played nearby. Pearl Washington, who had raised Tamara alone while working 2 jobs, had strong opinions about Horizon's offer. "They're just trying to save face," she insisted. "The minute this blows over, things will go back to how they were." Maybe Tamara acknowledged. But what if this is an opportunity to create actual change? Richard Blackwell seems genuinely committed. Pearl remained skeptical. Men like that don't change overnight. His kind built their fortunes on our backs. I know, Mama. But someone has to be first through the door. Why not me? Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Tamara's attorney, who had been reviewing Horizon's contract offer. "They've agreed to all your terms," she reported. Executive-level compensation, creative control budget authority, and a seat on the Diversity Council. Plus, they've added something new: stock options that would make you one of the largest individual shareholders outside the Blackwell family within 5 years. Tamara was stunned. That wasn't in my demands. Apparently, it was Richard Blackwell's idea. He called it investment in the future leadership of the company. I've never seen anything like it from a corporation with their history. After ending the call, Tamara sat quietly processing this development. Zora climbed into her lap, intuitive, as always, to her mother's mood. "Are you going to work for the rich man, Mommy?" she asked. Tamara smiled, brushing back her daughter's hair. "What do you think I should do, baby Zora?" considered the question with adorable seriousness. "I think you should make the pretty pictures wherever they let you put your name on them." From the mouths of babes, Tamara thought. Visibility and credit, what she had been denied throughout her career. That night, after putting Zora to bed, Tamara made her decision. She would accept Horizon's offer not because she trusted their sudden conversion to equity, but because the position gave her power to ensure the door remained open for others. The next morning, she called Richard Blackwell. "I accept your offer with one additional condition." "Name it," Richard replied immediately. "I want a formal mentorship program established for young designers of color with guaranteed internships and career development. And I want to name it after my daughter, who had the courage to walk into your office when doors were closed to people who look like us." There was a brief pause before Richard answered. "The Zora Turner Design Fellowship. Consider it done." That afternoon, Tamara signed her contract in Horizon's executive suite, the same room where Zora had presented her mother's portfolio days earlier. Catherine Phillips and Marcus Johnson welcomed her with genuine warmth, while other executives remained cautiously polite. Richard Blackwell made a brief statement to the assembled staff, acknowledging the company's past failures and committing to a new direction. "Change won't happen overnight," he concluded. "But it begins today, with honesty about where we've been and clarity about where we're going." As the meeting dispersed, Richard approached Tamara privately. "Thank you for giving Horizon this opportunity. I know you had other options." Tamara's response was measured. "I'm not doing this for Horizon, Mr. Blackwell. I'm doing it for every Black creative who deserves a fair chance. The real test will come after the media attention fades." Richard nodded solemnly. "I understand. And I'm prepared to be held accountable every step of the way." As Tamara left the building that evening, portfolio in hand and employment contract signed, she felt both trepidation and determination. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Changing entrenched corporate culture never was. But for the first time in her career, she had the position, authority, and support to make a meaningful difference. And it had all started because her 5-year-old daughter had been brave enough to walk into a room where she didn't yet belong but absolutely deserved to be. 6 months later, the transformation at Horizon Enterprises was visible from the moment visitors stepped into the lobby. The previously stark white walls now featured a rotating gallery of work by emerging artists of color. Chester Johnson, the security guard who had helped Zora that fateful day, had been promoted to head of building security. The receptionist desk, once Jennifer's exclusive domain, was now staffed by a diverse team of professionals who greeted visitors with genuine warmth. Tamara Washington's Creative Innovation Division occupied the entire 15th floor. Under her leadership, the team had grown to include 28 designers from varied backgrounds, many of whom had previously been overlooked by major agencies despite their exceptional talent. Their first major campaign had won 2 industry awards, with Tamara insisting that every team member involved be named and credited. Most significant was the change in Horizon's executive leadership. Catherine Phillips had been promoted to Executive Vice President of People and Culture, with expanded authority over hiring and workplace policies. Marcus Johnson now served as Chief Operating Officer, overseeing day-to-day operations. And most surprisingly to industry observers, Richard Blackwell had voluntarily stepped back from the CEO position, recruiting Dr. Elaine Jefferson, a highly respected Black executive with extensive marketing experience, to take the role while he focused on transforming the company's real estate investments. The on-site childcare center had been Tamara's first major initiative after joining Horizon. Initially met with resistance from finance executives concerned about costs, the center had proven invaluable for retaining talented parents who might otherwise have left the industry. On this particular morning, Tamara watched through the center's observation window as Zora helped younger children with an art project. At 6, her daughter had become something of a celebrity within the company, her fearless actions having catalyzed changes few had believed possible. "She has your eye for color," came a voice beside her. Tamara turned to find Richard Blackwell looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. Gone was the perfectly tailored suit, replaced by business casual attire that reflected his new role. "And your determination," Tamara acknowledged with a smile. Their professional relationship had evolved from mutual wariness to genuine respect over the past months. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, Richard reminded her. "Dr. Jefferson wants to discuss the Minority Business Initiative before the quarterly review." Tamara nodded. "I'll be there." "Just wanted to check on Zora first." As they walked toward the executive conference room, Richard updated her on his latest project. "We've finalized the transfer of your apartment building to the Community Land Trust. The residents will elect their own management board next month, with rent controls guaranteed for the next 20 years. This initiative had grown from their conversation in Tamara's apartment, expanding to include all 15 properties Blackwell Urban Development owned in historically Black neighborhoods. Rather than continuing to gentrify these communities, the buildings were being transferred to nonprofit ownership with long-term affordability guarantees. "What does your father think about all this?" Tamara asked. Richard's relationship with Robert Blackwell remained a sensitive subject. "He's still not speaking to me directly," Richard admitted. "But I heard he told a business associate that Horizon's stock price increase is begrudgingly impressive. Coming from him, that's practically an endorsement." The boardroom was already filling when they arrived. Dr. Jefferson nodded to them both before calling the meeting to order. The first agenda item was the Minority Business Initiative, which Tamara and Catherine had developed to support Black-owned vendors and suppliers. "Our goal is to direct at least 30% of Horizon's annual procurement budget to minority-owned businesses by next fiscal year." Tamara explained, presenting data on current spending patterns and identified opportunities. "We've already increased from 3% to 17% in 6 months, with no negative impact on quality or costs." The board's response was overwhelmingly positive, a marked change from the resistance similar proposals had faced in the past. Following the meeting, Tamara returned to her office to find an unexpected visitor waiting. James Porter, her former classmate, who now ran his own successful agency, sat chatting with her assistant. "James, what brings you to corporate America?" she asked, genuinely pleased to see him. James grinned, considering a collaboration actually. "Your Zora Turner Fellowship program has produced some impressive talent. I'm hoping to partner with you on the Westfield campaign, combining your resources with my agency's community connections." Their conversation was interrupted by Tamara's assistant announcing another visitor, a tall Black man in his mid-30s, wearing a tech company's branded jacket. "Michael Taylor, to see Richard Blackwell. He said you'd know what it's about." Richard, who had been passing by Tamara's office, stopped abruptly, his expression one of disbelief. "Michael." The men stared at each other for a long moment before Richard stepped forward, hand extended. "It's been 22 years. Michael nodded, accepting the handshake somewhat cautiously. When I read about the changes at Horizon, I didn't believe it. Had to see for myself if Richard Blackwell had really changed. Tamara and James exchanged confused glances until Richard explained. Michael's mother worked for my family when we were kids. We were best friends until my father. He trailed off, the old shame evident in his expression. Until your father fired my mother for letting me play with the boss's son, Michael finished. I always wondered what happened to you after that. I'd like to hear what happened to you, Richard said quietly. Michael's guarded expression softened slightly. Founded a tech startup, sold it, started another. Currently running Taylor Innovation Group specializing in AI applications for creative industries. Richard looked genuinely impressed. I've heard of your company. Your adaptive learning algorithm is revolutionary. Later that afternoon, Horizon employees gathered in the main atrium for a special announcement. Dr. Jefferson stood at the podium flanked by Tamara, Richard, and other executives. 6 months ago, Horizon Enterprises made a commitment to fundamental change, she began. Today, we're proud to announce the establishment of the Horizon Equity Fund, a $20 million investment initiative supporting Black entrepreneurs and creative professionals. What Dr. Jefferson didn't announce publicly was the detail Tamara had learned that morning. As part of her compensation package, she had been receiving ownership shares in the company, positioning her to eventually become a major stockholder with presence. Significant voting rights. This arrangement, Richard had explained privately, was a form of reparation for the company's historical discrimination against candidates like her. The event concluded with the unveiling of a new company tradition, Bring Your Truth to Work Day, an annual opportunity for employees at all levels to speak openly about their experiences and challenges without fear of reprisal. The idea had originated from Zora's innocent honesty that had broken through years of corporate denial. As attendees mingled afterward, Zora tugged on Richard's sleeve. Mr. Richman, she whispered loudly, can I tell you a secret? Richard knelt to her level, now comfortable with the nickname she had given him. Of course, Zora. What is it? She leaned close to his ear. I knew exactly what I was doing when I came to your office that day. Mommy taught me that sometimes you have to be brave to change things. I wasn't just helping Mommy, I was helping everybody like us. Richard stared at the child in astonishment as she skipped away to join the other children, leaving him to reconsider yet again the courage it had taken for her to walk into his office that day. Across the room, Tamara was deep in conversation with residents from her apartment building who were there to celebrate the newly established Community Land Trust. Mrs. Robinson, the elderly woman who had confronted Richard months earlier, now served as the trust's board president. We're buying the building from his company, she told Tamara proudly. Got the paperwork finalized yesterday. First time in 40 years I feel secure in my own home. Tamara smiled, watching as her professional success created ripples of change throughout her community. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been resistant setbacks and difficult conversations. But standing in this transformed space, seeing the tangible results of collective commitment to change, Tamara knew she had made the right decision. As the event wound down, Richard approached her one last time. There's something I never told you, he said quietly. The day Zora came to my office when I first saw your resume, I recognized your name immediately. I was the one who personally rejected your third application 18 months ago. I had the final say, not my father. Tamara absorbed this confession in silence. Why tell me this now, she finally asked. Because true change requires complete honesty, Richard replied. And because I want you to know how grateful I am that you gave me a second chance despite everything. Tamara considered his words before responding. Horizon didn't get a second chance because of my generosity, Richard. You got it because I decided my voice was needed inside these walls. The work isn't finished. Richard nodded in understanding. I know, but it's begun. As Tamara gathered Zora to head home, she reflected on how a single act of childish bravery had cascaded into institutional transformation. The 5-year-old who had marched into a CEO's office with her mother's resume had changed not just their family's trajectory but potentially an entire industry's approach to talent and opportunity. Ready to go home, brave girl? Tamara asked, taking her daughter's hand. Zora nodded, then paused to look back at the gathering. "Mommy," she said thoughtfully, "can other kids do what I did? Go to big offices and make things better for their mommies and daddies?" Tamara smiled, her heart full. "The point is, baby, they shouldn't have to. But because of what you did, maybe they won't need to." Together they walked out of Horizon Enterprises, not as supplicants, but as architects of change, their futures bright with possibilities neither had dared imagine 6 months before. Have you ever witnessed someone small make a huge difference, like Zora did? What moment in this story touched your heart the most? Was it when little Zora bravely stood before Richard, when Tamara refused to accept less than she deserved, or when Richard finally confronted his own biases? Comment below and let me know. If you believe in the power of courage to transform systems of inequality, please hit that like button right now. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that illuminate important social issues. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about standing up against discrimination, share this video with them today. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. This story powerfully illustrates that true change often begins with unexpected courage from unlikely sources. Zora, a 5-year-old child, accomplished what countless qualified adults couldn't, breaking through walls of systemic racism by simply refusing to accept that her mother's talent should be denied. Her innocent honesty forced Richard Blackwell to confront uncomfortable truths about his company's discriminatory practices that he had inherited and perpetuated. The narrative demonstrates how racial discrimination functions on multiple levels, from hiring practices to housing policies, creating interconnected barriers that limit opportunity for Black professionals. It shows that even the most entrenched systems can be transformed when brave individuals demand accountability. Tamara's journey reminds us that true equity isn't achieved through tokenism or performative diversity initiatives, but through structural changes in power and opportunity. Her refusal to accept less than she deserved forced a reckoning that benefited not just herself, but her entire community. Perhaps most importantly, the story teaches us that meaningful change requires both pressure from the outside and commitment from within. Richard's transformation from unconscious perpetuator to active ally demonstrates that privilege can become a tool for dismantling inequity when those who benefit from unjust systems acknowledge their role and take concrete action to create more equitable institutions. What moments in your life have you witnessed courage changing an unfair situation? Have you ever stood up against discrimination or been moved by someone who did? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might inspire others to find their voice too. If this powerful message of transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button to help more people discover it. Subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories that tackle important social issues and highlight the triumph of human dignity over systemic barriers. And if you know someone struggling against workplace discrimination, or anyone who needs this message of hope and perseverance, share this video with them today. Together we can create workplaces and communities where talent is recognized regardless of skin color. Thank you for joining us on this journey toward greater understanding and equality. Remember, sometimes the smallest voice can spark the biggest change.